Jared graduated from UCLA with a 3.7 GPA and a 512 on the MCAT. And although he has lower stats than most of the other applicants we review on this channel, he does better than the majority of pre-meds with 4 interviews and 2 ultimate acceptances. This application is perfect for pre-meds who don't have perfect 4.0, 525 MCAT scores and still want to get into top medical schools. Okay, so starting off here, we have his GPA and his 512, and we'll break down his 512 into his subsections. He has a 129, a 129, a 126 on bio and biochem, and a 128 on psych-soc. So you can see it's pretty evenly distributed outside of the bio score itself. And most pre-meds will look at a 512 and a 126 on biochem and think, oh man, this is pretty bad for me. I'm going to need to retake it to have any chance. But remember that medical school admissions is holistic. And so your MCAT score is only one piece of the puzzle. Your extracurriculars, your letters of recommendations, your written application, all of that is relevant. And in this case, his written application is so strong, it makes up for the fact that he had a 126 on biochem. And just to take a look at some of the classes that he took, we're seeing a bunch of A- in science classes, the physics, the life sciences, the genetics he had a B in, the molecular bio he had a B in, Chem 143, which is biochem he had a B plus in, B minus in cell bio, physics A minus, OChem A minus, stats A minus. Thermodynamics is chemistry class, got a B, and then Gen OChem lab got an A minus. So kind of a smattering of A's and A minuses and B's and B pluses, and really the only reason I share that is that this is a pre-med that a lot of us know. Like, they're not perfect when it comes to the classwork, but still with this very well written application, very well crafted extracurriculars, they are able to have real success on the medical school application process.
And if you want to see 8 full medical school applications that were memorable to medical schools, check out our application database. It features applications that have been accepted to UCLA Full Ride, UCSF, UCSD, USC, and it even includes my own application that got me into UCLA Medical School.
Too often, I think we see applicants who have a 4.0, 523 GPA, they get into Stanford. And for the majority of pre-meds, we don't have 4.0, 523s. And Stanford is not really even where we want to end up. So I'm hoping that this application is a little bit more relatable for all of us who have not perfect stats. We're gonna go straight to this first extracurricular here, this emergency medical technician. And you'll see that it's highlighted in a bunch of blues, greens, and reds. For those who aren't familiar with this framework, it's a framework we developed called the 20-40-40 RIR framework. The first R in blue is responsibilities. It really just says what you do. The I stands for impact, which can be demonstrated through stories or through data. It's really what have you accomplished. And then the last R, or the second R here, stands for reflection. Why does it matter what you did, and what did you learn, or how did you grow as a person from it? And I promise you, this will repeat again and again until it is inevitable that you believe this guy is ready and mature enough to take care of people. When the experience itself is strong, that helps you write more than anything else. So everyone notices these things. Make sure not to have these errors, have someone else read it, and not read it just for content, but read it for grammar and read it for spelling. It looks worse if you are trying to make it sound like something that it is not. So just make it sound like what it is. And so you'll see that the 20-40-40 RIR framework focuses on the latter half. You want to focus on the impact and focus on the reflection. And just give me really 1 or 2 sentences about the responsibilities, and that is it. You'll see, just based on the colors, there's very little blue, which means that there's very little that he explains as to what an EMT does. And truthfully, if I told you he was an EMT, you probably would know what they do. They help with transport, right? They help stabilize patients at the scene. And because we all know what they do, it's not important. What is important are the unique impact, the unique stories, the unique data that you have. What is important is the unique reflections that you have. and how you grew as a person. So let's read this together. Last summer, I trained for 2 months to become a certified EMT. I learned how to stabilize and transport patients to hospitals best equipped to them. After my classroom training was complete, I started to work for a private ambulance service where the training continues. He kind of weaves in his reflections throughout his sentences. And this one is a very subtle one that basically says like, even though I'm certified, even though I'm working, I still learn just like everyone else. I'm learning to be prompt without rushing. And again, I love it when people focus on non-medical learnings because again, medical school can teach you medicine. We don't need to know that you are learning how to interpret a 12-lead EKG, but I love these softer skills, prompt without rushing, to speak clearly but softly, and to show respect and kindness at all times. Wouldn't you want that in your EMT? And I love that this person, I forgot to mention, this person took no gap years. He was a young pre-med when he applied. And you're starting to see this real burgeoning young professional come out on the page. The most important thing that I needed to learn was how to remain in control of my emotions. How common is that for a 21-year-old male, right? As a new EMT, I was assigned to interfacility transport. Okay, so this is just his responsibilities. What are you doing? And I will never forget one specific patient who I was transporting to a hospice facility. Okay, great. So again, we're starting to see there's a little bit of reflection. He's figuring out how he wants to change as a man, as a professional. And let's keep going. After her family made the decision to stop chemo, she was extremely weak. Her cancer, together with her treatment, took a terrible toll on her, and it was painfully easy to lift her emaciated body onto the gurney. The patient needed oxygen and was in a lot of pain despite having been administered pain medications. Her younger sister rode in the back of the ambulance with us, and I wanted to keep the sister talking because I knew that it would comfort my patient to hear her sister's voice. The first motif that I noticed is that he's very observant, right? Extremely weak, a terrible toll on her body. And this phrase is just kind of haunting, that it's painfully easy to lift her emaciated body. Like this phrase alone, painfully easy. It should never be painfully easy to lift a adult, right? Maybe a young child, but you never want to feel like you have to lift an adult and, oh wow, they were way lighter than you thought they were. It just really speaks to how ill and frail she was.
That's at least how we do it here at Pre-Med Catalyst, and it's worked very well for us. It's only October, and we've already seen multiple acceptances and 35 plus interviews come in through our Slack channels. If you're applying this coming cycle and this has been helpful for you, then you might find our application advising even more helpful. Check out the link in the description box to learn more about how to work with us.
The second motif that I'm noticing is that he's not the hero, right? He paints the sister as the hero and the leader of this experience. I wanted to keep the sister talking because I knew the sister would comfort my patient, right? So this is the first instance of many where you'll see that the author does not make it about himself. He's okay if other people are doing the leading and other people are at the center of the stage if it means that his patient is getting the best care that they deserve. We spoke about my patient's life and about her favorite pastimes. I held her hand. Small, simple, that's it. Doesn't overextend, right? It's not, I read her EKG and diagnosed a peaked T wave and administered calcium carbonate to stabilize the cardiac membrane, right? It's not that. It's, I held her hand. When we dropped her off at the hospice facility, she smiled at me and whispered, "Thank you." Again, simple. That's the story, right? And it's specific to him. Really, the best detail is that painfully easy phrase. That alone, and the younger sister really taking the lead, makes it a good story. For several days after that trip, my thoughts returned to that patient and her family's suffering, conjuring very intense emotions that were difficult to cope with. Over time, experiences like that have led me to greatly mature as a person. After a lot of reflection and talking with my mentors, I understand that empathy and compassion are at the roots of medicine, and my own emotional well-being and ability to self-care are vital to preserve my effectiveness as a provider. I've learned that no matter what situation I'm faced with, striving to do my absolute best each time helps me achieve a sense of peace and purpose. So this conclusion is not new. I'm sure that you have read this conclusion from other premeds and other application dissections in the past. However, coupled with this story, it becomes compelling, right? Conclusions are never the problem. The evidence preceding the conclusion is the problem. If you believe the story and believe the evidence before, you will believe the conclusion if they match in caliber, right? And I think this is a good one that shows like he is empathetic, he is compassionate. This was hard on him, and you know that because of phrases like painfully easy. And so you're starting to see, again, this young 21-year-old man who is having reflections and mature thoughts that are wiser than his age. You'll see many premeds who take 1, 2, 3 gap years that have 2,000, 3,000 hours of clinical experience, and they don't see medicine and people the same way he does. And you're starting to really appreciate that motif begin. And it will, I promise you, this will repeat again and again until it is inevitable that you believe this guy is ready and mature enough to take care of people. It's not an age thing. It's an accomplishment. It's a maturity thing. So you'll see this is a repeated motif and a genuine humility and deference. He's not self-referential. The sister is the hero. The mentors get him through a difficult time. He is not picking him up by his own bootstraps. He's looking outside of himself and leaning on the sister and leaning on the mentors. I want to compare this EMT experience while we're here to another one so you can see the big difference on how two exact experiences, they're both EMT experiences, can feel drastically different. All right, so I want to take a look at our application database because I know here there is a fantastic application that gets into University of Cincinnati and it has an EMT. So yeah, here it is, University of Cincinnati, DAME, focused on underserved populations, medical technician. This is our application database. It has 8 full medical school applications, gets into schools like you can see here, GW, VCU, UCLA. This one's a UCLA full ride scholarship from one of my best buds. Always free, available in our link in our description box. You can see different kind of experiences here. So you can see their entire applications, including their personal statements. Hopefully it helps. So I'm gonna compare that EMT experience with this one that we just read here. Volunteer EMTB. After being nationally registered at the end of 2019, I joined this company and started running calls. Before I was sent home halfway through the semester, I ran 6 shifts with the squad. So you're seeing there's a little bit of an experience differential here, right? Only 50 hours versus the other guy did a complete like 700 hours as an EMT. I was directly involved in patient care, stabilizing broken bones, and running 12 leads in the field. Again, kind of like medically focused, which is fine, but I don't think is that relevant really to premeds. You'll see the first 2 sentences are just responsibilities, like what he's doing. Personal experience with treating patients has given me insight into the immense responsibility of healthcare professionals. That's red and a reflection. I wish to develop my capabilities in medical school to be better equipped to meet the standard. I see sentences like this a lot where it doesn't really add anything, right? It basically says I want to go to medical school to get better, which is the whole purpose of you applying to medical school in the first place. And so sentences like these, I don't think they're necessary. Since being home, I procured reciprocity of my license. Okay. I plan to resume running calls, but we'll wait until COVID-19 becomes less prevalent to avoid endangering my grandmother, whom I live with. Okay. So now we have a good sense of what that EMT experience looked like relative to this one. You can see that it really depends on how involved your experience was. Both people did EMTs, both were licensed, both ran calls, but you can see this one right here is so much more involved. It's just so much more color and depth and nuance than the other one, which was like, okay, fine, well, I'm guessing this is what an EMT does, and then you got COVID happened, and there's like nothing much else, right? So it goes to show you the writing people always think about, and I have to write so well, but if you have this experience, there's not much you can do. And so focus on the actual experience, the actual extracurricular. When the experience itself is strong, that helps you write more than anything else, okay? But focus on the extracurricular. All right. So move on next, and you'll notice there's starting to be a second stint in the emergency room as a volunteer here. For the past 12 months, I've been a volunteer in the emergency room at the hospital. So something like this, I also don't think it's needed because you told me you're an emergency volunteer and you told me you did it over the last, I would say actually close to 2 years instead of 12 months. But I don't need to know this. It's a little redundant, right? My job is to make patients and their families as comfortable as possible. I love this because it's not out of scope. You're an emergency room volunteer, and this is a person who knows their role on the team. And their role on the team is to make patients and their families as comfortable as possible. And I just appreciate how like he understands that this is his job and it's not below him. I deliver warm blankets, make the beds, clean up messes, and bring donated teddy bears to pediatric patients who are often scared and crying, right? Again, a simple, a humble, nothing is below him. You want that guy on your team. There's going to be a lot of things in medical school and in medicine where you're going to rely on the other guy you're on call with. And it's not going to be the most Herculean, beautiful task. It's going to be cleaning up a patient who peed all over the floor. It's going to be talking to a patient who's just yelling at you. And none of it is scientific and none of it is magical and saving lives. But you're going to have to want to rely on someone else to be there for you. And this guy who is making beds, cleaning up messes, bringing teddy bears, as a young 21-year-old male who wants to go to medical school, I just appreciate that he'll do anything to help the team out. I also get to see doctors. Notice some of these things here. This is probably because he wrote it in Google Docs or Microsoft Word and used the like justify feature instead of a left align, but he used a feature where like everything is on the left and on the right side is one kind of aligned paragraph. And when you copy it over, sometimes it keeps these hyphens. So everyone notices these things. Make sure not to have these errors, have someone else read it and not read it just for content, but read it for grammar and read it for spelling, because these things don't look great for you. It also could be the program after he downloads it and maybe messes it up, but you should be able to see the application prior to submission. You want to make sure you clean those things up. I also get to see doctors, interact with patients and staff, okay, it doesn't really tell me much, witness minor procedures, okay, and learn the importance of medical record keeping. So you can see, every time like medical stuff kind of comes up, we all get like less excited as readers because, I mean, we are in medicine every single day, and I'd rather read about the volunteer who's delivering warm blankets than the volunteer who's like witnessing minor procedures, you know. This experience taught me the art of talking to sick patients and enabled me to form relationships with medical professionals. Now, whenever I come pick up or drop off a patient at this hospital as an EMT, it feels like I am visiting home. And I just love this. This is just how like full circle this is coming, where he was a volunteer in this emergency room and now he's an EMT and he drops off patients in the same emergency room. And when he was a volunteer, he was delivering warm blankets and he knows he was giving these patients the best care that they could receive from him. And now he's giving the EMT patients the best care and the best patient kind of warmth and attention from that side of things. So it just makes everyone just feel great about how humble and appreciate just like his work on the team. And I just love it when experiences connect with each other because it says something about either like a applicant's intentionality, like he intentionally went from emergency room volunteer and then went to an EMT, or it says like his interests are like naturally growing in a way that we can understand, right? You have an emergency room volunteer who sees all these patients get picked up and dropped off, and now he goes, oh, I kind of want to do that. And he goes after it, successfully does it, and now he's here, right? So I just appreciate this overall. Okay. This is a Wikipedia publication. It's very simple. There's like a biochem piece called nicotinamide. It's a vitamin B3 found in food. I rewrote the chemistry and biochemistry portion of the article and updated the introduction. I hope that my work is helpful to biochemistry students around the world. And I just love how simple this is, right? It's simple, it's positive, it's eager, and it's not, most importantly, the number one mistake premeds make in this scenario is overextension. Basically, they try to connect it to medicine and make it sound like it's some fancy thing. They'll say, you know, I hope that nicotinamide, my work with nicotinamide is critical in medical technology advancements, and that vitamin B3 can help cancer patients worldwide. And it's just like, why are we doing that when the entire thing was you just like changing the grammar on Wikipedia? It looks worse if you are trying to make it sound like something that it is not. So just make it sound like what it is. I rewrote the portion and I updated the introduction, and I hope it's helpful for students around the world, period. That's it. Keep it there, right? That's the number one mistake premeds make for these super non-meaningful extracurriculars, like these smaller extracurriculars, 50 hours, is that they make it something that it's not. So learn from this lesson. I think this is done very beautifully. Next, chess.com. When I was 10 years old, my grandpa taught me how to play chess, to understand each piece, each permutation, and how to pick the right move. We played dozens of games over the years, and he would toy with me, grant me a handicap by removing his queen from the board, or giving himself mere seconds to make his moves. Again, this is a nice little story. You can see a grandpa kind of picking on a 10-year-old, giving himself mere seconds. I just love this like image of the grandpa like really pushing the pressure and the pace on a 10-year-old kid. These were epic contests where my ultimate and seemingly unattainable goal was victory over my master, right? You can see like this is like a 10-year-old who's like really trying to focus and beat grandpa, but is just running into a wall every single time. In college, I found many friends who are happy to play from time to time. I've been able to improve. Just last year, I finally defeated grandpa in an even contest. I like this like phrase, even contest, because of the seconds or the queen. Through chess, I learned the value of planning ahead and competing in a timed environment. And not only is it awesome from like the reader's perspective, because you're almost rooting for the kid who's growing up, but you're also just like seeing it from the grandpa's perspective. Like, I started playing with you when you were 10, and now as you got older and better, you're at a point now where we're an even match and you can take some games. And I just feel like as a grandpa, that would be everything that you would ever want for your grandchild, to see them grow up and be this like this sentient, intellectual, competitive family member that you have been with for decades now. One thing I will say is this feels simple, right? This feels like each word is like 5th to 7th grade level. The concepts are very clear. The storyline is very clear. And my comment is that it's paradoxically not easy to write a simple entry. Condensing it takes work. And I want to just show you guys this so that we're all on the same page of what getting to simple looks like. And simple, this is a highlighter. I'm gonna get a pen here for you. Okay, so simple is kind of a little bit of a journey, right? So you get this here, and on the x-axis we have kind of like, or on the y-axis, we have how complicated something is. And then on the x-axis, we have the amount of effort. So let me just go ahead and label these things for you.
If these real templates and real calendar timelines are helpful, another thing that may be helpful is to see real full medical school applications. Our application database tells you exactly what 8 medical students did to get into their dream medical schools. Schools like UCLA, UCI, and UC San Diego. My own application is on there so you can see what it took for someone to get into UCLA with no gap year.
All right, so we have on the y-axis complexity here. The higher you go, the more complex the writing is. And then on the x-axis, we have effort here. The more you go to the right, the more effort it takes. And so when you start, things are very like simple and low effort. You'll start here, but you won't really capture the essence and the main idea of what you're looking for. And so when you're starting to add ideas, you add these like epic contests, and you add the permutations and the handicaps that grandpa is giving you, you get a little bit more complex, right? but it takes some effort to get there. You have to try and get to that main idea. Most pre-meds will stop here because it sounds fancy, it makes them sound smart, but truthfully, the idea is still like kind of hard to understand. There's a lot of big words, the sentences don't really flow together. It's complex, and pure pre-med stop because there was a lot of effort there. But once you get to that stage, you need to try and condense now. Try and figure out what are the core main ideas. What is the simplest way that I can share that same idea? And so that takes even more effort to take something that's complex and re-simplify it back to this like baseline level of simplicity. But the difference this time is that it captures exactly all the main ideas that you're really looking to convey and share. And so remember this graph. It takes effort to go from simple to complicated and to capture the ideas that you're looking for, but don't stop there. It takes more effort to condense that complex writing into something more simple, just like this. It feels simple. It feels like it flows. Every sentence leads to the next, and that takes effort to condense it to its main ideas. The main ideas here being grandpa kind of raising me as a chess player at 10, and me getting to the point where I was able to play evenly with grandpa decades later. So let's go ahead and move to the next experience here. 600 hours over about 3 years. It's a research lab. I discovered this research while working as an equipment manager for the football team. I saw helmet installed sensors and found out that they were part of a study that tracks the impacts of objective parameters. Again, this hyphen, right? Objective parameters of those collisions that cause concussions, okay? The players complained of discomfort and resisted wearing the sensors. You get this like simple problem that is highlighted or underlined here in green because it's part of a story. As a former player and a current equipment manager, I was the right person to help, and I devised a much more efficient way to insert and access the sensors. A simple problem and a simple solution. Making the helmets more comfortable. It's taught me the importance, again, these hyphens, of consistency and collection of scientific data, and treating the test subjects as individuals and valuable members of the research team. That's a nice little reflection at the end. I think some researchers will just kind of be a little bit removed from the research subjects, especially if it's like a mouse. But in this case, the research subject is a human that plays football. And I just really appreciate that he recognizes that the football players are doing them a favor by consenting to the research, allowing these sensors that aren't comfortable and aren't necessary to be in their helmets, just so that they can learn about concussions a little bit more. So again, this is just the repeated motif of him being a humble, kind of more gracious kind of guy, and it comes out even in this small way. The thing that I like about this is that concussions is a big multi-million, if not billion-dollar field, right? Football and concussions have been huge in the media for the last decade. And while he could have made this a really big, blown entry about, like second hit syndrome and all these big concussion kind of media stories, he makes it simple. I was responsible for the sensors, and the sensors were uncomfortable. I played football, and I know what it's like to wear an uncomfortable helmet. And so I just devised a more efficient way to put and access the sensors. Do not misinterpret simplicity. Simplicity is a really good thing for you. And a lot of pre-meds think that if I'm too simple, I'm not memorable. But the opposite is true, so do not make that mistake. If you are simple, I understand the idea that you're trying to get across, and I remember the idea better. All right, now we're gonna move on to this next experience, camp. Let's see, over 3 years, close to 500 hours here. I greatly benefited from being guided and encouraged by supportive mentors. Again, immediately, he starts with how he appreciates other people. This is just a refreshing thing. You can see I'm smiling, right? It's just refreshing to read because not a lot of pre-meds will put other people at center stage, and he does it every single time. Countless students are not as fortunate as I am, and this motivated me to join camp. Our mission is to mentor students from underserved areas of Los Angeles who are interested in medical careers. And we do this by hosting these students for 3 spring days at a comfortable campsite, complete with cabins and meeting halls, and introduce them to professionals who represent a variety of medical careers. Again, just awesome, right? Countless students are not as fortunate as I am, and this motivated me to greatly join camp. When I first joined as a counselor in 2016, I fundraised for a family of 5 students to cover their cost of attending the camp. This is part of the story here. During camp, I served as my family's counselor. By the end of camp, there's a lot of these phrases that I don't think are necessary during camp, by the end of camp, when I first joined. I found myself acting as their mentor, explaining the college application process, showing them how to fill out FAFSA and share the SAT. I love these details because they're very specific. And as a reader, you'll remember filling out the FAFSA and sharing the SAT. I continue to mentor them for the ensuing 2 years, and I'm happy that all 5 are now in college. It's like such a really nice detail, right? You want to root for these people. Seeking more responsibility, I became a member of the board, recruiting speakers and mentors and scheduling all of the camp events. I learned how to gain the attention and commitment of very busy people, as well as the importance of flexibility, improv, and contingency planning. Again, I think this is a fine conclusion, but we need a story that really demonstrates that, and let's see if we get it. This year at 2 a.m., it looks like we're gonna get it. A PhD who was slotted to present at 8 a.m. emailed me that his presentation was not ready and he could not participate. That's very upsetting. Fortunately, an alumni who is now a medical student was available to come in the morning, so we had a presenter in place of our missing PhD. I spent the rest of the day reaching out to numerous professionals and finally found a pharmacist who agreed to give a presentation about his career path and the time slot originally meant for the medical student. So he's doing a little bit of logistics chess here. All this happened behind the scenes and the camp went off smoothly. Again, I just love this, right? It's simple. It's all behind the scenes. No one needed to know about it. We still went off smoothly and it was a success. I was elected as the director for next year, and I'll do my best to inspire a new group of students and mentors. Again, how many pre-med applications do you see just share a simple story like this of someone who couldn't make it, and so they found someone to replace them? And he doesn't take so much credit for it. He just says what he did and he gets the job done, right? The event needed to go on, and he's not judgmental about the PhD. He doesn't complain about the PhD one time in this description. He just says that he got it done. And if you're looking for a team member at 3 a.m. who needs to do a task for a patient, you need the guy that just gets things done. No ego, no questions asked. And this experience, as simple as it sounds, is a great representation of a person who you want on your team. And so I wrote here that you almost just want to root for the guy, right? It's like I was sleeping at 2 a.m. and now you have to present. It's 6 hours and I have to replace you. And it's probably extremely stressful. But he doesn't remark on that. He gets the job done and everything goes smoothly. All right, moving on here. We're gonna go to this clinical laboratory experience, 500 hours over a summer. To make sure that medicine was the right path for me, I sought out a summer job in the medical field immediately after freshman year of college. There are few more humbling experiences than working as a specimen unbagger at a medical lab. This job requires commitment to detail, but a strong stomach too. Working at the pathology lab, I learned about the work of lab assistants who remain mostly invisible as they perform incredibly important services for numerous offices, clinics, and hospitals in Los Angeles. Initially, I was given little responsibility. I love how honest this is. And my job consisted of opening the specimen containers and racking samples for testing. So this is a position that most people don't know about. I personally did not know about it until I read this. And of course, intuitively, you know that like if you send a urine sample or some blood, it has to get processed somewhere. So it's very interesting to hear the context of what that looks like needing a strong stomach. I'm sure there are probably not the greatest smells, and it's probably not fun to handle like warm urine as your job. And I can't imagine what it's like to handle like number 2 for other kind of tests, right? like blood in the stool or something like that. So he just like says it exactly how he sees it. He doesn't overextend. He doesn't make things sound more fancy. He's like, the best way that I can describe it is he's simple. And the simple is just really working well for him. And because I wrote here in blue, because of the consistency, you really believe all of his reflections. Every single experience, he's giving you a hint and a subtlety of, hey, this is just like, I'm a grateful guy and I'm happy to be here and I'm humble and I'll do whatever it takes to help the team. And every single time he tells you something like this, you start to believe him more and more. There's like this positive bias that is working in his favor. So one skill I learned at the lab is to be aware of my surroundings and to move smoothly and deliberately in order to prevent spills. And to have a sense of humor about spills that cannot be prevented. As my learning continued, I was given additional responsibilities. And I love how like he starts and he says, I was given little responsibility and over time I was given more responsibility. It's just honest, right? How many pre-meds are proud that their job is sitting at the front desk of the hospital and just like picking up the phone? How many people are proud that their job is to smile and say, hey, welcome to the hospital as a greeter? Because that was my job for 50 whole hours. And I was not proud of it. But he talks about his little responsibility and he says like it's almost like a part of the journey. And eventually he got more responsibilities. By the end of the summer, I was pulling samples, spinning them, and removing clots before testing. That's just awesome, right? You almost feel like you want this guy to win and do more and learn more. I learned how to aliquot samples, run the testing machines, record the results, and in case of urgent need, I was trusted to push stat tests through the lab. I love it. The best part of this experience was gaining acceptance of my coworkers as a full member of their team. And if you read this from another pre-med, you might think, no, that's pretty cheesy. That was not the best part of your job. But for this guy who's delivering warm blankets, bringing teddy bears to the pediatric patients, like I believe him. I believe that he loved just feeling accepted. As the summer ended and I prepared to leave the lab, many of them wanted me to stay and keep my job during the school year. Again, another pre-med, you would feel like this is cheesy and you're like, oh, you're full of yourself. But for this guy, that positive bias is really working for him. I was tempted to stay because of the great camaraderie I shared with him. Like, it's just nice. The leader of this lab is a professor in pathology at UCLA. He became one of my most treasured mentors during the past several years. Again, he just defers and is respectful to all the people that have helped him. And he puts it in writing. And he guided me to volunteer in the ER and to become an ENT. These are the two experiences that we have loved thus far. And he credits his journey to this mentor. It's just like, that's awesome. It's awesome for a young 21-year-old male, no gap year, to have the maturity and the gratitude to think like, oh, this isn't about me. I'm only here because of this mentor. I learned a lot, but my most valuable gain from the summer was his mentorship. All right, so I'm just writing these comments. Like, you want this guy on your team. You can't write about someone you're not. And he is talking about how his growth had come directly from these mentors. And he's built this personality and approaches. He's built this like mature, humble personality and the approach years in advance. Like, if you're not truly a humble, gracious person who thanks your mentors in emails every 3 months and who's like actually really engaged and attentive and will do anything to be a part of a team and help the team survive, you will not be able to write like this, because you will feel this cognitive dissonance where you'll be like, oh, I'm writing this, but it doesn't feel like it's true to myself. And 1 or 2 times you will slip and your writing will sound self-referential. You'll sound like you are better than other pre-meds. You'll sound that like you're above a certain task, and you'll do it because like that's the way that you see the world. But if you see the world truthfully in a way that this guy does, this writing becomes natural. It feels aligned with who he is and his identity and his personality. And so you can't write about someone you're not. You have to be this person first. You have to be the grateful, gracious, humble, deferential pre-med first, and then you can write like this. So overall, opposite of self-referential and heroic, it is always humble. Somebody else is always the hero. It's not him. He never makes it sound larger than life. It is just what it is, right? These are just great experiences on how you can convert simple, standard extracurriculars that anyone can get into real positive experiences, not only like in the writing, but actually like in real life that affected his growth and his trajectory. All right, let's move on here to this homeless outreach. On Tuesday nights, together with other students from different religious organizations, I serve dinner to the homeless by the church. We provide hot lentils, rice, fruit, water. We stand on this corner handing out food and talking to people who are in need. Many of the population that we serve are former veterans. Many are simply passing through on their way to their next destination. Many are regulars. 3 words, right? I usually really remember these smaller sentences that just pack a punch. Many are regulars. Painlessly easy to lift her emaciated body, right? You don't have to write so much with long sentences. And when you do, punctuate them with smaller sentences because these ones really land. This experience taught me how to talk to people who are down on their luck and how to comfort them with simple accent words to see the people who our society does not want to see, right? I just love this. I love like simply passing on their way to their next destination. It's almost like poetic. I love how simple the lentils and the rice and the fruit and the water. And I love this reflection at the end to see people who our society does not want to see. That is if you think about that phrase and you remember what you were like, or at least I'm speaking for myself. I remember what I was like when I was 21, and people experiencing homelessness made me uncomfortable. And to this day, sometimes they still make me uncomfortable. And there is just this like real maturity here for this 21-year-old kid who recognizes these guys are down on their luck. It's our responsibility to give food and water because we're in a more privileged position than they are. And I can put away my differences because even though I follow a different religion, we're all here to help a human. And at the ultimately, I become now more comfortable with these people experiencing homelessness that society ignores.
That's at least how we do it here at Pre-Med Catalyst, and it's worked very well for us. It's only October, and we've already seen multiple acceptances and 35 plus interviews come in through our Slack channels. If you're applying this coming cycle and this has been helpful for you, then you might find our application advising even more helpful. Check out the link in the description box to learn more about how to work with us.
And I think it is just amazing for someone. This was an application in 2019, 5-6 years ago. 5-6 years ago, I was not there, right? But my classmate and my friend whose application this is, Jared, he was there maturity-wise, and you can see it, right? There's just a lyrical simplicity, and that's always going to be greater than 14th grade complex writing with huge vocab words. You don't need that. All right. Let's move on to I am flag football. One of my favorite hobbies is flag football. I prefer team sports. I just love how simple this is. I like team sports. And football is the ultimate team sport. No single player can claim credit for a win or a loss. My teams have varied over the years from friends and classes, clubs, and work, and I've played every position on the field, even quarterback. My teams have tasted the sweet glory of victory. A high point would have to be the championship's victory against the club rugby team. You can see a story there. And the bitter devastation of defeat. A blowout loss to the men's cheerleading squad. Among the highs and lows of sports competition, I learned not only to be a loving teammate, but also a good sport, humble in victory and gracious in defeat. At this point, again, like, you can read this sentence for another pre-med and you'll say, I don't believe you. Like, you're just full of it. You're not humble in victory and you're not gracious in defeat. But do you believe him, Jared? I certainly do. I certainly do. Much of medicine is humility, deference, and respect, and he clearly shows this. He reminds himself of this, and he works to being this person. Next, we have a Christian organization, and really, let's just go to this here. I've also come to admire the way Jesus approached relationships, continually putting others before himself, and honoring people who are looked down upon and outcast from society. He reaches out to the broken to heal them and to welcome them to his family. And I, through homeless outreach, have tried to follow Jesus by showing love to people who were looked down upon and cast out. It's just, it makes sense, right? You get this very religious guy who is inspired by Jesus Christ as his role model or his leader, and you can see where he gets the humility and the teamwork when there's this like higher power that is guiding him to be the person that he thinks he should be, right? It makes sense. It's in alignment. We'll go to the last experience here before we hop into the personal statement, the equipment manager, and it's a ton of hours, 2,000 hours over 3 years. As a football equipment manager, I organize practice drills in coordination with coaches and other managers. I maintain the equipment from shoulder pads and helmets. Again, simple. During games, my responsibilities include emergency sideline repair and replacement, and I manage the software. I've met countless interesting and famous people through this activity and learned what it means to have a professional bearing. Okay, everything that we do as a team manager affects the team and the way that the public sees them in person and on TV. So it is of our utmost importance that we do our jobs right, that we make the team look perfect. This is just a great synopsis of who this guy is, right? Not only did he do this for 2,000 hours, and this is not a most meaningful experience, right? He's done this for 2,000 hours and it didn't even make most meaningful. He does this because he loves it. He does it because he knows his job on the team is to make the team look perfect. He's not a football player. He's a football equipment manager, and he knows that he has an integral part of the team. You got to make sure the equipment is right. You got to make sure the software is right. You got to make sure that you're your best self, because on TV, when everyone's looking at you at a national game, you don't want to be goofing around and hurting the brand or hurting the focus of the team that's all there to win the game, right? This sentence is just fantastic. Making the team look perfect. It's never about him, and he's the best team player, and he understands his role on the team. Great. So those working activities have really driven home that point, and you're getting a sense of who this guy is as a person, what he values, what his personality is. And he does that all just by writing in a very humble, non-self-referential way. Everyone else is the hero, and this is just his observations through his own life. And now let's hop into the personal statement here. Break. All right, my 9-year football playing career ended in an emergency room. Oh, you can see how like he ends up in the emergency room volunteer, emergency room as a patient, emergency room EMT. So it's a nice little full circle moment there. After the second game of my senior year in high school, when a doctor showed me the x-ray of my mangled right hand, he explained that if I re-injured it, I would require surgery and risk losing some function. Recovery was to be longer than the remaining season. The reality of no longer being a part of my team was more painful than the injury. Again, like, do you believe this? I do. Like, at this point, I do. That he puts others in front of him. He feels genuinely disappointed that he is not able to be there for his teammates. And I believe it. I was not ready to give up involvement in the sport, however, so I became an equipment manager for the football program in college. One of the players was from my hometown. We formed a close friendship. I was awed by his commitment to becoming a professional football player, but his dreams were crushed after he suffered multiple concussions during his junior year. His injuries were exacerbated by the undiagnosed concussions in his youth. To save what was left of his health, he had to give up his dream, and I knew exactly how he felt, right? So I think this is a great first paragraph that just, again, puts his personality on the center stage. When's the last time, I wrote here, when's the last time that you heard that there's an elite athlete like him that was so deferential, right? Usually you get the athletes that are like the late, great Kobe Bryant. Everything is selfish. Everything is about him. Everything is about excellence. But there's this guy that's like fully team first. He's a football manager now after his career ended because of his hand, and now his friend's career ends because of these concussions, and he is in pain. just as bad as if it were his own career that ended. My friend's adversity inspired me to join the mission to understand, diagnose, and prevent concussions. The program is a group of doctors and scientists who research sport-related brain injuries. These are the same providers who helped my friend make his difficult choice to end his football career. So now you're really getting a sense of how he understands the gravity and the responsibility that doctors have, right? But what a nuanced, powerful responsibility. A doctor who says and has the conversation, hey, like, you're going to really have to think about how this sport and the possibility of earning so much money that changes your life and your family's life, you're going to have to weigh that against your own health. That is a tough conversation. And through the lens of football, you're seeing this pre-med really understand what it means to be a doctor, what it means to have a tough discussion like that. Their comprehensive study of the team includes helmet sensors, which measures the magnitude of each collision. This data is paired with advanced neuroimaging and clinical tests, and it helps doctors increase their understanding of concussions and search for a precise mechanism of injury. Okay, so I'm starting to understand why and what this research is. Preliminary data from these sensors suggest that a hit following a string of smaller hits is more likely to cause a concussion than an isolated impact. Okay. So multiple hits back to back. And it's simple, right? It's not Jack K2 binds to a extracellular translocating receptor that activates CGMP. And it's not that. It's that a hit following a string of smaller hits is more likely to cause a concussion than an isolated impact. I just like it when research is described in a way that everyone can understand, because the majority of us will not be doing the same research that you do, especially given the fact that you're applying to 30 medical schools. The 30 people reading your application will not all understand what JAK2 is. The research promises to help find the means to prevent injuries like the one suffered by my friend. This led me to devote myself to running the operation of the impact measurement system in addition to my equipment manager duties. I now ensure that the accelerometers fit comfortably so that players actually wear them and transmit the data to the research team after each practice and game. I administer tests to players and assist with research, including MRI and transcranial Doppler. Because of this, evidence-based medicine became my passion. Which is awesome, right? I think this is one of the best personal statements that just really clearly walk you to why he wants to become a doctor. His career with his hand, then his friend's career with his friend's concussions, and then the opportunity for him to do something about it in his own way. It's just like a very natural evolution. Everything makes sense. It's awesome. You get this guy who's a team player. He's curious. He's a good guy. And at the end, you get to this conclusion. He is now very interested in evidence-based medicine. My interest in medicine led me to volunteer in the emergency room. Ironically, it's the same ER where my football career ended. I want to tell this like farmer's son story. The takeaway here is that events just are, but we as humans label them as good and bad. And he writes here that like, ironically, it's the same ER where my football career ended, but that's the same ER where he stops playing football, and that leads him to be the football manager at a college. And then that football manager leads him to get close to his friend from his hometown. And that leads him to getting interested in concussion research, and that leads him to medicine. And so was it a bad thing that his football career ended in that ER? It's not bad, nor is it good. It just happened. And the farmer's son story is like, there's a farmer who has a son who is on his horse, and he falls off the horse and breaks his leg. And the story goes, the neighbor comes over and he says, "I'm really sorry about your son's broken leg." And the farmer's dad goes, "It is what it is," or something like that, right? And later that day, the government comes to like to come like list young adults to the army because the country has a war, but they can't list him because he broke his leg, right? And the story goes, the neighbor goes, "Oh my gosh, like it's so lucky that your son broke his leg." And the father goes like, "It is what it is." And then the next day, the farmer's horse now runs away. And the neighbor goes, "Man, like, I'm really sorry. Like, you really needed that horse to till the land." And the farmer's dad goes, "It is what it is." And later that afternoon, that one horse brings back like 3 or 5 horses. And now they have just more than enough manpower to handle the farm. And so like an event is just what it is, and we label it as good or bad. But I think this is a great example of how like his broken hand led him to so many things over a decade that brought him to medicine. And truthfully, like as someone in medicine, I'm really glad he is a doctor. He's like a great guy that works hard, and clearly he has the right personality and the work ethic for this career. I interact with countless patients, and having been there as a patient myself, I felt a kinship with all of them. One patient stands out who was a young boy brought to the ER by his patients. I'll call him Charlie. He was drenched in sweat. His lips were pale. This is a thing that it's probably a comma maybe? I'm not sure, but make sure that if it's a period, it should be capitalized, right? I will call him Charlie. He was drenched in sweat, his lips were pale, and he was complaining about feeling dizzy. A nurse drew a sample of his blood, and he was terrified by the needle. Simple description, right? Charlie, sweat, pale, dizzy, blood, terrified. It's not all these big 7th, 9th, 11th grade words. I brought Charlie a teddy bear. I sat with him and I talked to him. I tried to calm him down for several minutes. I found out that he was in kindergarten. His favorite superhero was Spider-Man, and that his favorite game was Trouble. Again, I just like simple descriptions. You're really getting a sense of who this kid is without needing to do so much. Talking to me seemed to distract him, and so I stayed at his bedside with his parents. When the doctor arrived, she explained that the boy was hypoglycemic and that we were going to help him. Her use of the word "we" made me feel like an important part of her team. I just love this sentence. He's observant, and he explicitly calls out when other people include him as a member of the team. He feels happy. He feels joy from that. And that is the type of person you want as a doctor and a medical student, right? You want the guy who gets happy just because we say that we are all on the same team. Like, that is the guy who will work until he's dead tired to get the job done, right? And I just love it. Again, it's not our team. It's not the patient's team. It is her team, like the doctor's team. And he recognizes that. More blood was drawn, an IV was hung, and the patient's symptoms soon began to improve. Playing my small part to support Charlie through this stressful experience while observing the doctor provide accurate diagnoses and treatment exposed me to the art and science of medicine. Okay, so again, he just comes with so much humility. You feel like you're grateful he's here on your team. You're rooting for him. You want him to do well. And even, this is not perfect writing, right? Accurate diagnosis and treatment exposed me to the art and science of medicine. It's kind of like broad and clunky and generic. And even if it is broad, he gets this leeway because we trust him. We trust the author. We trust who he is. You're rooting for him. You're not trying to find faults in his story. You're positively biased to want to see the good in him. And so even if this writing is not perfect, you ignore it because you are just so appreciative about everything else he's bringing to the table. You can get away with a lot when you have great experiences, great personality, and great writing, right? You can get away with a 126 on biochem. You can get away with a 3.7 GPA if these are the other things you're bringing to the table. Being thought of as a member of the team was inspiring and made me want to do more, and I believe him. Last summer, I became a certified EMT. I now work 2 overnight shifts. Most of my patients need a broad bay gurney, and none of it can be done alone without coordination and teamwork. He continues to repeat this motif. After the patient is safely inside the ambulance, one of us drives while the other stays in the back to render care. I prefer to stay in the back, to take the history, monitor the vitals, give oxygen, and make sure the patient's safe. Most are in pain, and I try to relieve their suffering as much as I can by talking to them and holding their hands as the ambulance speeds through our sleeping city. Just like, what a beautiful phrase. Simple. Again, you don't start by writing that phrase. It's not easy to write that phrase. You start with a clunky phrase that kind of talks about how EMTs like go through in the dark of night or something that sounds like Batman. And then you make it a little bit more complex, and then with more effort, you get to this simple, condensed phrase. Speeds through our sleeping city. It's not easy to get here, right? It's not easy to get here. So if it sounds easy, it's not easy. And if you're having trouble writing like that, it's not easy, and you should know that. It will take work. I always wonder what happens to them after they arrive at the hospital, what treatments they receive, and if they ever get better. Although I enjoy being an EMT, my goal is to become a physician. It's just so pure, man. Like, it's just so pure and simple. And other pre-meds who write the exact same thing, I'm calling them out because they sound like cheese balls. But this guy, I just believe. I wonder what happens when I drop them off. I hope they get better. And because I am curious, I now want to be a doctor to see what the other side looks like. All right, and there's a nice little conclusion. But you can see how this personal statement and the working activities, they all work in tandem. He did a fantastic job of really showing this personality of humility and team player and being the guy that will do anything to get the job done.
That's at least how we do it here at Pre-Med Catalyst, and it's worked very well for us. It's only October, and we've already seen multiple acceptances and 35 plus interviews come in through our Slack channels. If you're applying this coming cycle and this has been helpful for you, then you might find our application advising even more helpful. Check out the link in the description box to learn more about how to work with us.
All right, now, so we are wrapping up, and let's go to our key takeaways from this application. And the first one is, what can I serve you today? And this is a story from a cookie company that is 1 block away from where I live in New York. And when you walk in, their opening line is, what can I serve you today? And it's just this, like, it makes you feel bubbly and almost a little bit awkward. It's like, oh, what do you mean serve me? It's like a cookie shop. But they really take their job and their hospitality seriously. And like another quote would be, after you pay for their cookie, it's like you baked them cookies and you dropped them off with warm milk so that their kid could enjoy Christmas. You'll leave the door and they'll say, absolutely my pleasure, thank you for coming in. Even though they were the one that baked the cookie and I just paid for it, right? They make you feel like superstars. And the takeaway here, and then the third example I have is, there's a local grocery store 1 block away from our place again, that was closed, but I really needed yogurt for this thing. And even though they were closed for half an hour and I peeked my head in to see if they were still open, the clerk ran outside. He opened the door and said, hey, why don't you just come on in, get whatever you need, take your time. And the store was closed. I was the only one there. I had the whole store to myself. But it's like that level of hospitality and care. That is what this application feels like. It feels like he cares about his fellow man and woman and child. It feels like he's the type of guy that you want stereotypically to be your doctor, because you will feel absolutely cared for. And that is a huge bonus to this application. I forgot he had a 3.7 GPA. I forgot he had a 126 on the biochem, on a 512 on the MCAT. I've been rooting for him since we started reading this application. And it's because it feels this way. It's humble, it's giving, and you will want to try and emulate that in your own application. But again, you can't emulate that if you're not that person. You have to work to build these personality traits and work to be this person. You can't just write this way. It's not a stylistic thing. It's an identity thing, right? All right, so let's move on to the second conclusion here is, when you work with someone you're rooting for, you start to give them the benefit of the doubt. You want them to win and succeed. You're not looking for places to poke holes in their story. And so if you see in another application breakdown I'll do, I find holes in a lot of places. And this writing was by no means perfect, right? There are a couple examples where he could have added more stories and been more clear. And sometimes the conclusions didn't fully match what the story was prior. But that's okay because we gave him the benefit of the doubt and he has this positive bias that's working for him. You are rooting for him. You want to be in this position because, again, you get more rope, you get more leeway to make mistakes and to be an imperfect pre-med. And in this case, like, his big glaring thing is he's a 3.7 GPA and a 512 in the MCAT with a 126 on biochem. For most pre-meds, that is going to have you struggle, right? Especially if you're looking to get into the schools that he got into. You might get into your state schools, you might get into lower tiered schools, but he performed way above his weight class. And I think there's a very clear reason why. It's because we're not looking to poke holes in his story. We're rooting for him and we want him to win. Oh. Takeaway number 3 here, self-referential is not the answer. You will stand out for the wrong reasons. Paradoxically, you will shine when you put the spotlight on other people. And I want pre-meds to know this. When you highlight your mentors and you say that it's other people's teams and you say that the sister was the key ingredient in helping this poor cancer patient feel comfortable, the spotlight is put on someone else. And oxymoronically, that makes you look really good because you don't have to be the hero. You don't have to be the shooting star that saves the day. You recognize that you're a part of a team, other people can shine, and you can be there to support them. Self-referential is never the answer. You will not shine. You will not stand out if you're not humble. And lastly, simple writing is greater than 14th grade writing, but simple does not mean easy. When you see simple writing, it's because they did a lot of work, a lot of effort here to go from simple, then complex, then back to simple. The caliber, again, on the y-axis is that it's simple here and complex here, but the simple here doesn't really capture the main idea that you want. It's broad, but it takes work to go from simple to complex, then back to simple with a concise simple, a value-dense simple, a bunch of main ideas simple. So don't underestimate the value of that type of writing. You want to get there, and it takes work to get there. And a lot of things people ask me when they read and watch these application breakdowns is, how did they get that writing to be so clear? Well, it takes a lot of work, and you're on that first stage. Your writing is clear, but it's like not the right idea, or your writing is more often very complex, but there's just too much here, and you need to condense and make it simpler. Lastly here, writing is a team sport. If things feel complex, you won't be able to see it. Someone else will tell you, hey, this writing is a little confusing here, or hey, this writing has not really hit the spot. So you'll want to use other people to help you along the way. Writing is a team sport. And if you're ever looking for teammates on your writing application, we're always available here at PREMED Catalyst to help support you. Thanks for watching this entire application. Jared did fantastically. He ended up with 4 interviews and 2 acceptances, eventually going to GW, George Washington Medical School, a fantastic medical school that you wouldn't have expected with those stats, especially that 126 on biochem. But that's besides the point when you build an application that is world-class in humility and that really conveys the type of person you want on your team.